guys, I'm Alex.
I'm Jason, we're the Table Monkeys, and today we are going to continue to talk about the King's move.
Yeah, so in our recent analysis video, we were talking about Marcus's King's move against Ryan, and how if Ryan knew how to deal with it better, he could have beat Marcus's King's move, but he was playing it a little wrong, and maybe by the time it was in those later rounds in that King's move, he was burnt out. But if he knew how to deal with it better, maybe he could have beaten him.
And most recently at the free-for-all event that Burgoyne, the Beer Man, and Alan Ford threw with BLM up in Pembroke, it was fucking amazing. And I came away with some really good wins, which I'm really proud of, which are going to be on Arm Sports videos coming out later this week, so keep your eyes out for that. Unfortunately, they were the only ones that were allowed to film, so we don't have any footage of it, but they put out great footage, and they said we can use it once they put it out, so that's awesome. But one of the really good matches I had was I got a great win over Logan LeClaire, who is a beast, no questions asked. And he got caught up in my King's move, made a lot of the same mistakes that Ryan made, and could have, based on how the after pulling and how strong he is, I think he's definitely strong enough to have dealt with my King's move if he knew how to do it properly. And in the after pulling, like, I let him play with it and try to find his way around it, and for sure he was strong enough and able to find a way around it. So we want to talk about three main things with the King's move, right? How to know you're in it, because that's one of the first mistakes that people make, is they don't realize that they're getting trapped in a King's move, and they get deep into it before they realize it, and then they can't get out of it.
Yeah, emotions are high, you're in that tournament setting, and you just want to bang because you don't want to waste energy in a tournament, right?
Yeah,
so.
and the King's move, if done properly, feels very weak from here to here. So you feel like, no, I should be able to get through that, and you get caught in it real quick. So we want to talk about how to know that's happening and where that line is, that you're caught in it. Then we want to talk about the main thing that you want to control or try to protect when going against the King's move, which is like the first way to beat it. And then the other part is that there's kind of two King's moves now, because there's so many newer pullers who are figuring out how to do it, like myself. I don't have a bone lock, my arm fully extends, so I actually do the King's move by laying on the side of my elbow. So if Alex is trying to pin my arm, he's pushing almost like an arm bar in jiu-jitsu or something. He's trying to push my elbow joint this way, and I'm using that joint and that joint lock to control the King's move. So if someone does that, and that's how Marcus does it, that's how a lot of newer pullers do it. Reagan, you know I'm talking to you. So if someone is King's moving like that, there's another way that you can beat it by attacking their bicep, which wouldn't really work on a bone lock King's mover, but on one of these newer King's movers, it'll be very effective. So those are the three things we want to talk about.
Yeah. So let's get in the strap and start this video.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this scenario, Jason's King's moving, and I'm more of a traditional arm wrestler where I'm fighting for back pressure, side pressure, all the fundamentals in the hand, cup, rise, roll. So what I'll notice right away is that he's not fighting for flexion, so he's not going to try and take my rotation. All he cares about is his pronation and rise. And as I go to the side, I'm going to notice that I start feeling this pressure in my wrist from his pronation. He's dragging, so there's a ton of dead space in here. He's not fighting for up pressure. And as I continue to go to the side, I start to lose my flexion more and more. And then I reach this lock where he's in this, on the back of the pad, drag engaged. He's got his pronation and his rise completely engaged. And I cannot go any further this way because my wrist continues to buckle. That's how I know I'm in the King's move.
So everything Alex just said is 100% exactly what I'm doing. I'm not fighting for flexion, I'm fighting for the pronation. And what I'm waiting for is him to fight hard enough that I know as soon as he comes back, I can rise and take a ton more of his hand, and then even take his pronation if I want. Maybe not on the first drive, but eventually I'll be able to easily take his pronation as well. Mm-hmm. So the key about knowing you're in it is knowing when to stop banging into it, right? So you need to bang into it a bit to feel it and know what's going on, but you don't want to slam into it over and over to the point where you lose your hand so much that on the correction, you're fucked. So like, this is one thing Alex learned really early on about how to deal with it is okay, he's losing his wrist, but it's where can he start to get it back, right? So Let's go on to the first thing that you want to do. Like the main thing you want to attack is my pronation. So the main thing you want to try to keep is your flexion. And that's what, like, for example, Brzezinski, when he dealt with it against Michael Todd way back, and even if you just saw that most recent video, the most important thing he goes after is the pronation, which is why he's actually good at dealing with it because his cup is just so ridiculous. You know what I mean?
And you to start attacking their pronation, you have to take them out of that lock because it's impossible to beat their pronation once they're in that lock.
Yeah.
So movement on the pad is really key here.
Yeah.
Taking them out of that
sorry,
position.
a quick note about that lock is so much of it comes from the strap. That's why once he's here, if he starts trying to like fight for his cup, because of how much tension I can create in the strap, it's so much harder for him to get it than if he's trying to fight for it over here, where I can't create that same rotational force that I can down here.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sorry, go on now.
So not only is flexion super important for taking pronation, but supination is also really key. So those are the two things that I'm going to use to try and attack his pronation. But first of all, what I need to do is I need to bring myself over to this side of the pad. So I'm on the right side. That changes his lock, his angle. He now has to adjust and move over to the his left side of the pad. So he's got way less lock. And then as I move over the pad, that's where I can start to supinate, get my flexion back and bring the match towards me. Then I can surge again. Oh, I'm gonna lose a little bit of my flexion. He's gonna try and find his lock again, but he's in a worse position. I've kept more of my hand, and I can keep redoing that, coming back and hitting with more and more of my hand each time. And then hopefully what I do is I beat his pronation, I open his arm up, so now he's on his bicep. And then because he has no lock, he's got no ability to stop that. He can't access his pronation in the king's move, and he's just in an open arm hook with no hand.
And even if you do have a lock, without the pronation, that's usually, if you notice Michael Todd, like once his pronation's gone, that's when he can actually feel it in his bicep, and then he has to give up the match. So the pronation is 100% the key of what's going on. But let's say that the guy's pronation, regardless of that pressure that you're getting off, you just still can't get through it. Like it's still just too tight of a pronation lock, and the guy doesn't have an actual bone lock. So this is like the newer, like the Marcus Attila, like this is our number one advice that Ryan should have done. This slamming move, because of Marcus's lever and Ryan's lever, probably wouldn't have been a great choice. Like he probably wouldn't have been able to get as much flexion. Alex can do this to me really well because he has a longer lever. With a shorter lever, this doesn't work as good. So like Logan could have done this to me. His lever's long enough, we're comparable enough that he'd probably be able to, from that move, keep enough flexion and do that to me. Devon, really good at doing that to me, as he proved on my left arm, because that's exactly what he did. Every time he's doing exactly that. But let's say you can't do that, your lever's too short, or the strengths are comparable enough that he's actually able to maintain his pronation, but the person doesn't have an actual bone lock, like myself, like Marcus. Then the next trick comes back to using this side of the pad, right? So wait, can I do it to you? So Alex is kingsing on me here. I'm coming back, and every time I come back, I can get some flexion, but I just can't get enough going this way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to drag him out and drag him to this part of the pad with a lot of up pressure and back pressure, like in his fingers. So now he's got to reach for me. And because one of the main things that I'm doing when I'm kings moving, so sorry, if he does that, now I can slam into his pronation a lot easier. But one of the main things, if you do it to me now and I'll kings you, one thing I noticed really early on is I didn't have a lot of this pressure, like side pressure. And so I was like, okay, but there was somebody in my club who had a lot of side pressure right off the bat. So I had to figure out how to deal with that. And one thing I learned was that if I drag while he's going sideways, I could kind of use my drag against his side pressure. So that's a lot of how the kings move, the drag in the kings move is based. So when Alex goes to this side of the pad, dragging and up pressuring really hard, it pulls me really far away from that angle that I'm trying to reach. So now when he slams into it, I've got to get all the way back around. And that's what makes it really hard to maintain and puts a huge amount of pressure, like puts extra or exponential pressure on my pronator by me trying to like make that rotation while he's going into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you got to time it perfectly.
Yeah. So if you have people that like to kings move in your club and they don't have a bone lock because they're a new puller, which is becoming very common nowadays, use this trick: up pressure, back pressure to the back of the pad. Feel their thumb because they're trying to rotate into your hand, and maybe you don't even have full flexion back yet, but as long as your wrist is at least flat, then from there you slam up into their thumb and come across. You might not get there on the first one, like they might be able to force enough pronation that they still get a lock, but you're familiar with what that lock is now. You're gonna feel it, and then you do it again And every time you do it, you try to maintain what you got, and try not to blow their bicep, because it will go. And that's how you deal with a King's move, in our opinion.
Yep. Okay, so in conclusion, you know you're in a King's move because there's a ton of dead space in the center. He's not fighting for up pressure or side pressure. As soon as you drive sideways, you start feeling this pressure in the strap attacking your flexion. You notice he's dragging the back of the pad and only focus on his pronation. That's when you know when you're in a King's move, and you have to be patient with what you do next. So instead of continuing to bang to the side, what you need to do is figure out a way to get your flexion back and to break that pronation. And you can do that by coming back to your side of the pad, supinating and cupping to gain some flexion, and then bang to the side. Maybe you don't get the pin right away and you have to reset and do it a few times and until you can break that pronation and put them on their bicep. Now, if that doesn't work,
due to either their pronation being too strong or the fact that they have a bone lock that is too hard for you to get through. So a lot of newer King's movers are finding that pronation here, and they're using a bone lock like I'm using, which is based on this pressure into my joint and not my actual like bicep not opening up.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, like Alex said, the dragging pressure that I'm using is pulling me back to the side of the pad. So he opens me up and pulls me away from that by using a lot of up pressure and dragging to the back of the pad, and then same thing, supinate and drive to the side and try to take my flexion.
Yep.
And in doing that, it's going to force me to have to retreat again and make this big run to the back, which puts a ton of pressure on my pronator and could possibly pop a bicep.
Yeah. So we hope that helps. Please try that out in your next practice if you have a bunch of King's movers that are causing trouble.
Yeah, go slow. You know, you don't have to, I don't like watch next week. There's like 15 videos of blowing biceps, but go slow and try to learn and understand the move. I think the most important part of all this is the first step, which is knowing when you're in it.
Yeah.
You know, because it's very easy to get caught up in. So that's the video. Hope you like it. Smash the bell, hit the subscribe button,
Like, comment,
all those things.
and monkeys out. I'll let you have that one.